The member for Newmarket Aurora had previously given notice of a point of privilege. I will recognize the member at this time to state his point. I would also ask the member to give a brief synopsis of his very thorough written point, which has already been made available to me, and I note delivered to the three House leaders as well. The member for Newmarket Aurora.
Thank you, Speaker. On the 22nd of August, in accordance with Standing Order 21C, I wrote to advise you that I intended to raise a point of privilege at my first available opportunity. This being it, I do so. Speaker, this point of privilege relates to a disparaging document that was sent to MPPs, the Queen's Park Press Gallery, numerous other media outlets, and as of yet, an undetermined number of businesses and community organizations. The document, which is unsigned, impugns my integrity and reputation and is clearly intended to intimidate and obstruct me from carrying out my duties as a member of the Legislature, and specifically as those duties relate to my responsibilities as a member of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. In addition to being riddled with false and misleading information, the document accuses me of having been involved in criminal activities. A copy of that document, which was first distributed on July 30th, was delivered to you with my notice to you on the 22nd of August. I have referred this matter to the Ontario Provincial Police with a request that this document, which I believe falls under the Criminal Code of Canada's definition of defamatory libel and intimidation of a justice system participant, be reviewed in the context of Sections 289, 299, and 423, subsection 1 of the Criminal Code of Canada, and that this matter be investigated and that every effort be made to determine the source. There can be no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that this document was created and distributed with the express purpose of damaging my reputation and intimidating me in my role as a parliamentarian. Parliamentary privilege is defined by Erskine May as the sum of the peculiar rights enjoyed by each House collectively and by members of each House individually, without which they could not discharge their functions. O'Brien and Bosk further describe peculiar rights as the rights members share collectively and the rights each individual member has. In particular, I draw your attention to a member's right to be free from obstruction, interference, intimidation, and molestation. I emphasize these privileges because I feel that this document has unduly interfered with my work here in this chamber, with my responsibilities and duties as a member on the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and in general, with my role as a parliamentarian. Parliamentary authority states that it is impossible to codify all incidents which might be interpreted as matters of obstruction, interference, molestation, or intimidation, and as such constitute prima facie cases of privilege. However, some matters found to be prima facie include the damaging of a member's reputation, the intimidation of members and their staff and of witnesses before committees. O'Brien and Bosk also note that speakers have consistently upheld the right of the House to the services of its members free from intimidation. Furthermore, O'Brien and Bosk state that the unjust...
Can I ask the member to summarize, because I was looking for a brief synopsis, not complete
Speaker,
synopsis.
with all due respect, this is incredibly important to all members of the House. I beg your indulgence. Further, O'Brien and Bosk state that the unjust damaging of a member's good name might be seen as consulting an obstruction if the member is prevented from performing his or her parliamentary functions. They illustrate this using a 1987 ruling from Speaker Fraser that states that the privileges of a member are violated by any action which might impede him or her in the fulfillment of his or her duties and functions. It is obvious that the unjust damaging of a reputation could constitute such impediment. The document in question was created in an attempt to impugn my reputation and in an attempt to impede my work as a parliamentarian, my duties here in this chamber, and my work on the Public Accounts Committee's investigation of the scandal at Orange. It is evident from the very first sentence of the document in question that its contents and distribution are directly tied to my work on the investigation into Ornge. As you know, I've spoken on this issue numerous times during debate and question period. I have raised the issue through questions to the Premier, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Health, and the Government House Leader. And I have examined numerous witnesses in my duties as a member of the Public Accounts Committee investigating the Ornge scandal. It is in the context of my work on this file that the document calls into question my ability, and I quote, to question anyone else's integrity, end of quote. It is obvious that this statement is referring to my questions relating to the Ornge scandal in the Legislature and the examination of witnesses who have come before that committee to testify concerning their involvement at Ornge. It is clear that this defamation campaign was designed to intimidate me from carrying on with that work. Speaker, I draw your attention to a recent case of precedent involving Public Safety Minister Vic Taves and the group Anonymous. The group published videos on the Internet which made various allegations about Mr. Taves' private life and also made specific threats, all of which was in reaction to Mr. Taves' introduction of Bill C-30 on February 27, 2012. Mr. Taves rose on a point of privilege, arguing that the threatened actions of the videos constituted an attempt to intimidate him in his role as a Member of Parliament. House of Commons Speaker Andrew Scheer ruled that this case constituted a prima facie question of privilege because the language used in the videos does indeed constitute a direct threat to the Minister in particular, as well as other members. These threats demonstrate a flagrant disregard of our traditions and a subversive attack on the most fundamental privileges of this House. Speaker Scheer stated in his ruling, when duly elected members are personally threatened for their work in Parliament, whether introducing a bill, making a statement, or casting a vote, this House must take the matter seriously. In addition, former Speaker of the House of Commons, Lucien Lamoureux, stated in a 1973 ruling that there is no hesitation in reaffirming the principle that parliamentary privilege includes the right of a member to discharge his responsibilities as a member of the House, free from threats or attempts at intimidation. Mr. Speaker, it's evident that this document was created and distributed with the explicit purpose of damaging my reputation as a parliamentarian in an attempt to discredit my role as a parliamentarian in the investigation of the scandal at Ornge. And I appreciate the fact that vigorous debate can and does occur in this House. However, there is a fine line between freedom of speech and this document, which was designed with the sole purpose of intimidating me as a member of this legislature and damaging my reputation. Joseph Mango in Parliamentary Privilege in Canada offers insight into the delicate balance between critical speech and a breach of privilege or contempt. All interferences with members' privileges of freedom of speech, such as editorials and other public comment, are not breaches of privilege even though they influence the conduct of members in their parliamentary work. But any attempt by improper means to influence or obstruct a member in his parliamentary work may constitute contempt. Using the criteria set out by Mango, it is apparent that this document is the latter and was meant to influence my parliamentary work on the Public Accounts Committee and here in this chamber. Lastly, former House of Commons Speaker Gilbert Perron, on March 24, 1994, stated, "Threats of blackmail or intimidation of a member of Parliament should never be taken lightly. When such occurs, the very essence of free speech is undermined. Without the guarantee of freedom of speech, no member of Parliament can do his duty as expected." Speaker, I've had the privilege of serving as a member of the Ontario Legislature since 1995, and over the course of those years have often been on the forefront of contentious issues. Vigorous debate is not unfamiliar to any of us, and as parliamentarians we accept that from time to time we'll be subject to attack and ridicule. We learn to cope with that dimension of our calling. This document, however, crosses the line, and I am compelled to bring it to your attention and to the attention of this House, and to request that you review this matter to determine whether prima facie a breach of privilege has occurred. I also ask that every effort be made and that the necessary resources be made available to determine the source of the document. Speaker, as parliamentarians, we must be able to investigate and study issues freely without being intimidated. If we do not deal with this issue and we leave these tactics unaddressed, we put the rights and privileges of all members of this legislature in jeopardy.
Well done.